The storm came without warning. Snow crashed across the frozen world of Veltrian, 5 like waves in a violent ocean. Wind screamed through the abandoned mining outpost, shaking the metal walls of the lonely cabin hidden near the edge of the wasteland. Inside, Elrich Ward sat alone beside a weak heater. The cabin was silent except for the soft hum of old machines and the crackling sound of a dying fire. A half-empty cup rested in his rough hands, but the tea inside had already gone cold. He didn't care. Nothing stayed warm long on Veltrian 5. Not food, not metal, not people. Elrich had lived alone here for almost 6 years. Most humans had escaped the colony after the war destroyed the outer systems. The mines shut down. The factories died. Entire cities froze beneath endless snow. But Elrich stayed. Some people called him crazy. Others called him a ghost. The truth was simpler. He had nowhere else to go. The war had taken everything from him long ago. Now silence was the only thing he trusted. Outside, the storm roared harder. The cabin walls groaned beneath the pressure of the freezing wind. Snow covered the windows completely, turning the world outside into endless white darkness. Elrich leaned back slowly and reached toward an old military satchel hanging near the wall. Inside was a faded photograph. 4 soldiers smiled back at him. 3 were dead. The 4th was Elrich himself. Younger, cleaner, still capable of smiling. His thumb brushed across the picture quietly. Then, knock. Elrich froze instantly. The sound was almost lost beneath the storm. Another knock followed. Weak, desperate. His survival instincts activated immediately. In one fast motion, he grabbed the plasma revolver mounted beside the door and approached carefully. Nobody came here. Nobody. He unlocked the heavy metal door slowly. The freezing wind exploded into the cabin. And standing outside was a woman. Not human. Alien. Her pale blue skin was nearly white from the cold. Long silver hair whipped violently through the storm, while glowing golden eyes struggled to stay open. 2 small children clung tightly to her legs. Both shaking. Both freezing. The older child, a boy no older than 7, stood protectively in front of the smaller girl despite barely being able to stand himself. The woman looked directly at Elrich. Her voice trembled painfully. "I can cook," she whispered. The wind almost stole the words away. "I can clean." Her eyes lowered weakly. "I can warm your bed." Then tears filled her glowing eyes. "Just please feed my children." Elrich stared at her silently. The words hit harder than the storm. Not because they shocked him, but because of how empty they sounded. Not seductive, not manipulative, just defeated. The little girl looked up at Elrich with wide, tired eyes. "Do you have soup?" she asked softly. The boy quickly pulled her closer protectively. Elrich noticed immediately. Their feet were bare, blue from the cold. The woman nearly collapsed where she stood. That was enough. "Get inside," Elrich ordered. The woman blinked in shock. For a moment, she looked like she didn't believe him. Then quickly, she pushed the children forward into the warmth of the cabin. The little girl nearly fell beside the heater instantly. The boy stayed alert, watching Elrich carefully like a wounded animal expecting danger. The woman entered last. Snow covered her torn clothing and bruised skin. Elrich locked the door behind them while the storm continued screaming outside. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The little girl crawled closer to the heater, holding her frozen hands near the warmth. The boy kept himself between Elrich and his family. Even exhausted, he was protecting them. Elrich lowered his weapon slowly. "What are your names?" The woman hesitated. Then quietly, "Mazzari." She pointed weakly toward the boy. "Cello." Then toward the girl. "And Tiva." Tiva looked up brightly. "Your cabin is warm," she whispered. Elrich ignored the painful feeling rising in his chest. He walked toward the kitchen shelf silently and grabbed the last container of stew from storage. Mazzari noticed immediately. "You don't have to waste food on us," she whispered. Elrich said nothing. Minutes later, steam filled the cabin. The children stared at the bowls like they were seeing treasure. Tiva ate too fast and started coughing instantly. Elrich handed her water before Mazzari could react. "She's okay," he said quietly. Mazzari looked stunned. Not by the water, by the kindness. Cello still watched Elrich carefully. Suspicious. Protective. "You're not going to make Mama cry, right?" the boy asked suddenly. The room became silent. Elrich looked at him for several long seconds, then answered honestly. "No." Cello relaxed slightly. Only slightly. Hours later, After the children finally fell asleep beside the heater, Elrich returned with blankets. Mazzari immediately stood. "You gave us food," she whispered nervously. "I haven't repaid you yet." Elrich frowned. "You don't owe me anything." Her expression changed instantly. Confusion, like she didn't understand the sentence. Slowly, she lowered her eyes. "Most people ask for something." Elrich looked toward the sleeping children, then back at her bruised wrists. Something dark twisted inside his chest. He handed her the blanket. "The bed is warm," he said quietly. Mazzari stared at him in disbelief. "You trust us?" Elrich looked toward the storm outside, then back toward the exhausted alien mother standing in his cabin. "No," he admitted honestly, "but I trust the storm less." Morning on Veltrian, 5 arrived without sunlight. The endless white storm outside had weakened during the night, but snow still covered the windows completely. The frozen world beyond the cabin remained hidden beneath silence and ice. Inside, however, things had changed. For the first time in years, Elrich's cabin no longer felt empty. The heater hummed softly near the wall, while the smell of warmed soup drifted through the small room. Blankets covered the floor beside the fire where the 2 alien children still slept peacefully. Tiva hugged a rolled-up cloth like a doll. Cello slept lightly beside her, one arm protectively stretched across his little sister, even in sleep. Elrich stood quietly near the kitchen counter watching them. Something about it felt strange, unfamiliar, dangerous, warm. Behind him, soft footsteps moved across the cabin floor. Mazzari had awakened. She moved carefully, almost silently, like someone trained not to disturb others. Her silver-white hair rested loosely over one shoulder, while the oversized thermal blanket wrapped tightly around her thin body. When she noticed Elrich watching the children, she lowered her eyes immediately. "Thank you," she whispered softly. Elrich shrugged. They needed rest. Mazzari nodded slowly. Then after a long silence, "So did I." That surprised him. Not the words, the honesty. Elrich handed her a metal cup filled with warm water. She accepted it carefully with both hands like it was something precious. "You can stop looking afraid," Elrich muttered. Mazzari looked confused. "I'm not going to throw you outside." Her fingers tightened around the cup slightly. "I know," but her voice said otherwise. Elrich had seen fear before. War created many versions of it, and Mazzari carried the kind that never truly slept. Behind them, Tiva suddenly sat upright. "Soup?" she asked immediately. Elrich blinked once. Mazzari covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Tiva rubbed her eyes sleepily. "Please tell me there's more soup." "There's more soup," Elrich answered. The little girl smiled like he had just saved the universe. Cello woke moments later, instantly alert. His eyes locked onto Elrich immediately. Still cautious, still suspicious. "You watched us sleep?" he asked carefully. Elrich frowned. "No." Cello stared at him. "You look like someone who watches things." Mazzari sighed softly. "Cello." But Elrich surprised himself by laughing quietly. The boy wasn't wrong. "I was making sure the heater didn't fail," Elrich answered. Cello accepted the explanation after a few seconds. Mostly, while breakfast warmed over the burner, Tiva wandered around the cabin curiously. "You live here all alone?" she asked. "Yes." "That sounds sad." Elrich nearly choked on his drink. Mazzari looked horrified. "Tiva." "What?" the little girl asked innocently. Elrich stared into his cup for a moment. Then quietly, "It was." The room became silent. Mazzari studied him carefully now, not with fear, with curiosity. After breakfast, Elrich began repairing damaged wiring near the heating system. To his surprise, Cello silently joined him. The boy crouched nearby, watching every movement carefully. "You know machines?" Elrich asked. "A little." "From where?" Cello hesitated. Then quietly, "Work camps." Elrich's hand stopped moving. Mazzari froze across the room. Tiva looked down silently. The atmosphere changed instantly. Work camps. Elrich knew exactly what that meant. Forced labor colonies. Children raised around machinery instead of schools. People treated like tools. His jaw tightened slowly. "How old are you?" he asked. 8. 8 years old, and already talking like a tired adult. Elrich hated that immediately. Cello pointed toward the damaged wire. "That connector will burn if the voltage spikes." Elrich blinked. The boy was right. "You noticed that?" Cello nodded once. "My father repaired heat systems before the war." A shadow crossed Mazzari's face at the mention of him. Elrich noticed, but he didn't ask. Not yet. Hours passed slowly inside the cabin, while snow drifted quietly beyond the windows. For the first time in years, the silence no longer felt empty. Tiva eventually sat beside Elrich, holding charcoal in her tiny fingers. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Drawing." She proudly held up the cabin wall. 3 terrible stick figures covered the metal surface. One tall, 2 small. The tall one had a giant scar across its face. "That's you," Tiva explained proudly. Elrich stared at the drawing, then at her. "Why does my head look broken?" "Because sad people always look cracked." Mazzari inhaled sharply, but Elrich didn't speak. Because somehow, the child had seen straight through him. Tiva pointed toward the drawing again. "You're standing in the middle." "Why?" "Because you protect everybody." The room became completely silent. Even cello stopped working. Elrich looked at the crude drawing for several long seconds. Something heavy moved painfully inside his chest. A feeling he had buried years ago. Family. Hope. Belonging. Dangerous things. Very dangerous things. That night, while the children slept near the heater again, Mazzari quietly approached Elrich near the window. Snow drifted endlessly outside. "You don't ask questions," she whispered. Elrich crossed his arms. "People talk when they're ready." Mazzari looked down at her bruised wrists. "Most people don't wait." Elrich studied her silently, then finally asked the one question that mattered. "Who hurt you?" Mazzari closed her eyes. For several seconds, she couldn't answer. And somehow, that answer felt worse than words. The storm returned that night. Wind slammed against the cabin walls while snow buried the frozen world outside once again. The heater struggled softly against the cold, humming like an exhausted heart inside the small shelter. But inside the cabin, nobody slept easily. Elrich sat alone near the fire, staring into the orange glow while old memories crawled through his mind like ghosts. Across the room, Mazzari sat beside the sleeping children, watching them, always watching them, like she expected someone to take them away the moment she looked elsewhere. Elrich noticed that. He noticed everything. Finally, after hours of silence, "You can sleep," he muttered quietly. Mazzari looked toward him slowly. "I do sleep." "No," Elrich replied. "You wait." Her eyes lowered instantly. That answer alone told him enough. The fire crackled softly between them. Outside, the storm screamed louder. Then quietly, "They call me damaged." Elrich looked up. Mazzari's voice barely rose above the sound of the wind. "In my world, females without mates are seen as weak." She wrapped her arms around herself tighter. "When my husband died during the war, people changed." Tiva stirred softly in her sleep nearby. Mazzari's eyes softened instantly while brushing silver hair from her daughter's face. "At first they offered help," she whispered. "Then they offered ownership." Elrich's jaw tightened. Mazzari continued staring into the fire. "Some wanted a servant." Her voice became smaller. "Some wanted a body." The room fell silent. Elrich felt anger rise slowly inside his chest. Cold anger. The dangerous kind. "I refused them." A bitter smile crossed her lips. "That made them cruel." Elrich finally understood the bruises. The fear. The way she flinched any time someone moved too quickly. "They hurt you," he said quietly. Mazzari didn't answer. She didn't need to. After several seconds, cello suddenly spoke from the darkness. "They hit Mama because she said no." Elrich looked toward him instantly. The boy sat awake beside the heater now, holding his blanket tightly. His eyes looked older than any child's eyes should. "They said females without mates belong to whoever feeds them," cello whispered. Mazzari closed her eyes painfully. "Cello." But the boy kept speaking. "One man tried taking Tiva away." The little girl shifted slightly in her sleep. Elrich felt something inside him snap coldly. "What happened?" he asked carefully. Cello looked toward his mother, then back toward Elrich. "Mama stabbed him." Silence. Absolute silence. Even the storm outside seemed quieter for one moment. Mazzari finally spoke again. "I didn't kill him." Elrich crossed his arms slowly. "But you wanted to." She looked directly into his eyes for the first time. "Yes." No shame. No apology. Only honesty. And somehow, Elrich respected her more because of it. After a long silence, he stood and walked toward the kitchen shelf. Mazzari watched nervously, but Elrich only grabbed another blanket and handed it toward her. "You and the kids take the bed tonight." Her expression changed immediately. Confusion again. "You already gave us shelter. You need sleep more than I do." "That's not fair." Elrich gave a tired shrug. Life hasn't been fair to you either. Mazzari stared at him silently. Then something unexpected happened. Her eyes filled with tears. Not dramatic crying. Not weakness. Just exhaustion finally breaking apart. I don't understand you, she whispered. Elrich leaned against the wall quietly. That makes two of us. A tiny laugh escaped her despite herself. Soft. Broken. Beautiful. It shocked both of them. Tiva suddenly opened one sleepy eye. Mama smiled. She mumbled happily. Mazzari immediately wiped her face. Go back to sleep. But you smiled, Tiva repeated proudly. Cello rolled his eyes dramatically. She's going to talk about this for weeks. I heard that. The small moment filled the cabin with warmth stronger than the heater itself. And Elrich realized something dangerous. He liked hearing them laugh. Far too much. Later that night, after the children finally fell asleep again, Mazzari quietly approached him near the window. The frozen wasteland stretched endlessly outside. You lost someone too, she whispered suddenly. Elrich's face hardened immediately. Mazzari noticed. I can see it. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then quietly, my daughter. Mazzari's breath caught softly. Elrich stared out into the storm. She was 6. His voice sounded distant now, like someone remembering pain buried under years of silence. I left for deployment thinking I'd come home in 3 weeks. His fists tightened slowly. She died while I was gone. Mazzari stepped closer carefully. Elrich. I missed her by 6 hours. The words nearly broke inside his throat. The room became painfully silent. Mazzari slowly reached toward him. Not out of pity. Not fear. Understanding. Her fingers gently touched the scar on his face. You survived, she whispered. Elrich laughed bitterly. No. Mazzari shook her head softly. Yes, you did. Their eyes met. And for the first time in years, someone truly saw the pain he carried. Not the soldier. Not the scar. The man beneath it. Outside, the storm continued raging across Veltrian 5. But inside the cabin, 2 broken people quietly stopped carrying their pain alone. Winter slowly began to loosen its grip on Veltrian 5. The endless storms became weaker. Snow still covered most of the frozen wasteland. But for the first time in years, pale sunlight occasionally touched the surface of the ice. And somehow, the cabin no longer felt lonely. The silence inside had changed completely now. Not empty. Not painful. Alive. Tiva's laughter filled the small shelter almost every day. Cello spent hours helping Elrich repair broken machines while pretending he wasn't enjoying himself. And Mazzari. Mazzari had stopped looking at the door every few minutes like she expected danger to walk through it. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. One morning, Elrich stepped outside carrying a crate of damaged solar parts while Cello followed behind him carefully. The boy pointed toward the frozen field beside the cabin. Nothing grows here. Elrich glanced toward the ice-covered ground. Not anymore. Cello thought for a moment. Maybe we can change that. Elrich almost laughed. Nothing survived on Veltrian 5. But later that same day, he caught Tiva placing tiny seeds into melted patches of soil near the cabin wall. What are you doing? He asked. The little girl looked up proudly. Making spring. Elrich stared at her silently. Then surprisingly, he helped her dig. Days slowly became weeks. The small frozen field beside the cabin slowly transformed into something alive. Tiny green plants pushed through the cold earth. Mazzari cried the first time she saw them. Not loudly, quietly, like someone finally allowing themselves to believe tomorrow existed. That night, the 4 of them sat beside the heater eating warm stew together. Cello proudly held up a small carved wooden figure. I made this. Tiva gasped dramatically. It looks ugly. It's supposed to be Elrich. Oh, the little girl nodded seriously. Then it's accurate. Mazzari burst into laughter instantly. Real laughter. Bright. Warm. Beautiful. Even Elrich couldn't stop himself from smiling. And suddenly, something strange happened. Tiva climbed directly into Elrich's lap without asking. Like it was the most natural thing in the universe. She looked up at him sleepily. Papa. The entire room froze. Cello stopped breathing. Mazzari stared silently. Even Tiva seemed surprised by the word after it escaped. Elrich's heart hit his ribs painfully. Papa. The word he thought he would never hear again. Tiva's expression slowly became nervous. I can stop saying it. Elrich immediately shook his head. No. His voice sounded rough suddenly. The little girl blinked. Really? Elrich looked toward Mazzari. Her golden eyes were filled with emotion now. Fear, hope, love, all mixed together. Slowly, Elrich wrapped one arm around Tiva carefully. "You can say it," he whispered. Tiva smiled instantly and hugged him tightly. Cello looked away, quickly pretending not to react. But Elrich saw the tears in the boy's eyes anyway. And honestly, he felt his own eyes burning too. Later that night, after the children finally fell asleep beside the heater, Mazzari stood quietly beside the window, watching snow drift beyond the glass. Elrich approached slowly. "She's wanted to call you that for days," Mazzari admitted softly. Elrich leaned beside her silently. "I was afraid to." He looked toward her carefully. "Why?" Mazzari smiled sadly. "Because things this good usually disappear." The words hit hard. Because Elrich understood them completely. For several moments, neither spoke. Then softly, "You don't have to be afraid here." Mazzari looked at him. Really looked at him. Not the soldier. Not the survivor. The man. "I think I stopped being afraid the moment you opened that door," she whispered. Elrich's chest tightened painfully. Mazzari stepped closer slowly. Close enough for him to feel her warmth. "You gave my children safety," she whispered. "You gave me peace." Her hand gently touched the scar across his face. "And you gave yourself another chance to live." Elrich stared into her glowing golden eyes. Then finally, he kissed her. Softly, carefully, like both of them feared the moment might disappear. But it didn't. Mazzari's hands rested gently against his chest while years of loneliness quietly melted away between them. Outside, the frozen world remained cold and endless. But inside the little cabin on Veltrian 5, there was warmth, family, love, and for the first time since losing everything, Elrich Ward finally felt home again.